Weekly dose of arts and entertainment news.
Now, as a continuation of our hair-raising debate today, the recent hair protests by young black girls at former Model C schools across the country has received countless support from all walks of life. But are there voices that have remained largely marginalized, very still, or deafeningly still? For more on this, we are joined in studio by the executive member of the Africentrik Study Group at the University of Fort Hare, Thando Sipuye. Very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning and thank you for having me.
First and foremost, you wrote a piece, a critique about the level of support given to the girls when the story broke at the Pretoria Girls High School in their fight against that hair policy there. What motivates your position on this issue?
Really, I think that what I wanted to highlight more than anything is that this whole hair issue, this whole episode is more than just an issue of hair. You know, and it speaks to broader issues of identity, culture, consciousness, and broader histories really of dispossession and dehumanization of black people in South Africa. And I say identity because hair is an intrinsic part of who we are. And culture because our hair is sacred. And it forms a very important part of our cultural expression as African people in terms of initiation ceremonies, death, and other things that, you know, happen in African life. Consciousness because our hair actually, beyond just carrying ancestral memory, it also really carries a living consciousness, a part of who we are. And so that article was more than just being a critique. It was basically an analysis of our condition as black people, you know, the way we respond and, you know, react towards racism, white supremacy in general.
Do we understand in modern day South Africa today, do we understand that prominence of what hair actually means to not only black people but to everyone else?
I actually think that we don't actually. And I think this also comes from this particular history that I'm talking about. As black people, we have been made historically to actually hate ourselves, despise not only the texture of our hair, but the color of our skin. Everything African, as you know, there are these colonial narratives and stereotypes that have been constructed about us. And so because of that particular kind of history, we don't have the full knowledge of what actually hair represents in African culture, in the African worldview.
Yes. Now, some parents at the Pretoria High Schools admitted that they let down their kids to a certain degree in relation to the code of conduct that relates to hair at that particular school. We spoke to some analysts earlier that suggested that, you know, if we look back just before democracy, that policy was taken from the Model C schools and implemented by the then President F.W. de Klerk, and we haven't changed it at all.
Indeed.
Could that be some of the reasons that people are still living in the past, so to speak?
Indeed, I think, as I have said, that these broader histories of dehumanization and dispossession, it's not only around issues of dispossession with land, but dispossession in terms of aesthetics, beauty, how we define things and how we see things. And I think that generally, as black people, we have tended not to speak to that, or we are complicit sometimes, you know, in exercising some of these rules and codes of conduct, which are actually anti-African. They were actually constructed to literally obliterate the African, you know, and so it's part and parcel of the broader annihilation of black people, you know.
During the course of the week, in the follow-up to the hair story at Pretoria Girls, there was a story where boys were told, not at the Pretoria school, but somewhere another school, that says that they indicated when they go for cultural rituals, like they're burying somebody, then the hair should be cut by the boys. In this case, when they do that, when they come back to school, they are then told and being punished, so they can't wear their blazers and that sort of thing. Is this still part and parcel of this perpetuation of our culture that you're talking about?
It is indeed. It is part and parcel of the very same suppression of because you have to understand the context in which the school comes into existence. The schools were established by colonial missionaries. And they were part and parcel of the colonial project. And that colonial project was aimed at actually dehumanizing African people, robbing African people of the knowledge of self, knowledge of their culture, the very power of their own being. And so schools that exist today are part and parcel of that history, you know, continuing the very same function, you know, of actually dehumanizing and robbing African people of really essential part of themselves. And schools are part and parcel of other institutions.
I want to rush you on this one because I want to talk about Rastafarian, because you wear dreadlocks, and that has also been seen by society as dirty or have other connotations to it.
Indeed. Actually, you know, one of the reasons that motivated that article is because each and every year, including this year in January, there's always stories of Rasta kids who are being excluded systematically from school because they wear dreadlocks. And these stories have also gone into the news, social media, and everywhere. And in fact, black people themselves have tended to say the very same thing, that, no, these Rastas must cut off this hair. It's dirty, it's untidy, it's not clean. You know, and this is part and parcel of the very same psychology, you know, and a sense of inferiority that our people have internalized, really. You know, and so really, as a Rastafarian, as you're saying, this hair issue is something that is very close to our hearts. It's something that we advocate. It's something we talk about. You know, the importance, the value, the spiritual, the cultural, and the political value, significance of the hair.
Thando Wetu, we need some more time on this, but that's where we got to leave it. Thank you so much for
you
joining us here in studio.
Thanks
now, that was the Africentrik Study Group, the executive member of the Africentrik Study Group at the University of Fort Hare, Thando Sipuye, joining us in studio.